Jane Perlez, thank you for coming to UNC Chapel Hill. Thank you for talking to the Customer Event Series. We very much enjoyed your lecture and the Q&A. You've been Bureau Chief for the New York Times in Beijing for 7-8 years, a long time. What were among the most interesting experiences you've made?
Well, I think what's been most interesting is discovering things before they really became public. So I wrote about Made in China 2025, the industrial policy, before it became really known. I went to Laos and wrote about the Belt and Road Initiative before it really became a big deal. I sort of like to lead the way. And also, I very much enjoyed reporting about China's new bank, AIIB, and the Obama administration's failure to stop its allies from joining that bank. The Obama administration was very worried about that bank and tried to persuade South Korea and Australia, for example, to not join the bank, and they failed miserably.
Where is China going, both domestically and globally?
I think globally, it may be at a bit of a crossroads. There is some backlash against China, obviously, because of the questions surrounding 5G and the tech world. I do think that the Obama administration putting Huawei on the entity list raised a lot of questions for China and for the rest of the world. Domestically, I think, all things considered, that the economy will continue to grow, albeit at a slower pace. And I think the Chinese welcome the fact that they can have more decent lives than their parents had. And I think probably that paradigm will last for a while longer.
And regarding the United States, do you believe that strategic rivalry between the US and China will continue, even if the trade war can be overcome temporarily or for good?
I do think the strategic rivalry will continue, and I think it will probably increase. I think that China is quite intent on getting Taiwan back. I'm not sure that the United States would actually intervene to stop it, but it would create a lot of tension. And I think that there are hard times coming in the Asia-Pacific region as the two powers confront each other there. But to confront each other doesn't necessarily mean you have to be enemies. And that's why I think that it would be better if there was serious contact on both sides instead of the episodic contact that there is now.
So are we moving towards a so-called G2 world? China, the hegemon in the Pacific, the US, the hegemon in the Atlantic, and perhaps in some other parts of the world?
Possibly, particularly if Europe goes into problems to do with Brexit or to do with its own economies. But maybe the whole world is going to go into recession. I think it's very hard to predict. But all I do feel certain about is that there will be perhaps growing even more competition in the Asia-Pacific region.
Would a G2 world, basically, to put it in simple terms, the dividing up of the world between China and the United States, would that be a bad idea?
Would that be?
A bad idea.
I think so, because that means that you're back to an old kind of Cold War situation. And China is a very, very different country to the old Soviet Union. China has an amazing economy. It has amazing brain power. It has a huge number of people. And I think that G2 situation where there is strategic rivalry and harsh competition is very dangerous.
There are also domestic problems in China. The expanding middle class needs to be satisfied. There are the problem of the social credit system, of internal control, also uprisings perhaps, or protest movements in Xinjiang and elsewhere. What will China do about that? Can that be resolved?
I don't think the domestic situation is as dire as you painted. I think that the rising middle class is still able to rise, albeit with a bit more difficulty than maybe 5 years ago, but I think that they are still able to rise. Car sales are down this year, but that's to do with the trade war and various other things. Look, I think the government is making strides on the environment. I think that they're making strides on housing. I think they're making strides on eradicating poverty. And they've got a pretty good propaganda machine going. And I think that can keep things in line for the next 10 years or so.
So the Communist Party will continue to govern for 10 years, not longer?
I have no idea. If only a fool would predict that. But I think that, talk in Washington that we, meaning the United States, can decouple from China and squash the Chinese economy. I think this is dreaming, and I think it's. I think I'm not an economist, but there are economists out there that I respect who believe that it is dreaming too. I mean, one result of this trade war actually is to encourage the Chinese state-owned enterprises. They're not the most efficient, and maybe it'll be money misspent, but I think it's encouraging state-owned enterprises to try and get ahead even more quickly on the Made in China 2025 program, which is to try and get ahead on autonomous cars, AI, and the like.
You worked on 2025, you discovered it even before it was widely known, you said. Is it really as disconcerting for Western companies and countries as it has been seen for by some?
Well, interestingly, it was the Germans in Beijing who are most alert to Made in China 2025. And I think it is disconcerting because it's unfair competition.
Much is being talked about the Belt and Road Initiative. Some praise it, say it's great. Some have the opposite concern, say it's very negative. It justifies China's global expansion. How do you see that?
Well, I think China has learned that they just can't go into countries and steamroller countries like Sri Lanka and others into accepting huge amounts of debt in order to satisfy perhaps a strategic interest of the Chinese government. I think it would be much healthier if the Chinese government opened their Belt and Road initiatives to open bidding and to and accept international standards. And there are some inclinations of that. I mean, there are some people inside the Chinese government who would like that to happen. But also the slowing economy in China may also slow down the Belt and Road initiative.
Do you see Western countries essentially on one side, or is the West being divided, not just superficially, but structurally for a prolonged period of time?
You mean you're talking about the situation in Europe, with
Yes.
the Chinese are making inroads? I think the Chinese are being very clever from their point of view in having a good relationship, a special relationship with 16 countries in the European Union, and with Hungary among those 16 countries, China can prevent a unified European Union either joining the United States or acting on its own as a unified bloc. So I wouldn't underestimate the diplomatic tactics and ability of China.
And how is it going to continue after Trump? Will American foreign policy towards China change significantly, or have all parties in the US become convinced that the Trump approach towards China may not be perfect, but may not be wrong at all?
Well, I think, unfortunately, that it may not change too much, and there are senior Democrats like Chuck Schumer who seem to support the Trump approach. It seems to me there have got to be more constructive and serious ways to talk to China than calling them the enemy and wanting to decouple completely. It seems to me the work of diplomacy is to try and find solutions, and there doesn't seem to be much effort in doing so.
Jane Perlez, thank you very much for your insights. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Very good to be here, and thank you for having me.